What if as your company grew, as you added more people, the company just felt better, not worse? It felt smarter, more agile, just more awesome overall. You look at big companies, so oftentimes you look at big companies and you say, boy, they're making dumb decisions. Why is that? They have endless resources to hire smart people, and they do hire smart people. But then you look at the decisions they're making and you're like, what the hell are they thinking? Years ago, a colleague of mine referred to this phenomenon as big dumb, and I've spent the majority of my career trying to figure out how to avoid it. After all this time, I figured out that there is one thing you can do in the early days of your startup that will help you avoid the big dumb phenomenon. Not only avoid it, but it actually reverses it so that as your company gets bigger, it gets more awesome. This is a super meaty topic, so put on your serious pants or whatever garment you use to focus, and let's start the journey. Okay, focus garments aren't a thing. Anyway, start the intro. One of the things I hear from founders all the time is that they love the way their company feels when it's small, and they're worried that as it grows, it'll start to feel less special. They want to maintain the magic. Now let's focus on that word feels, because it's super important, but it's really mushy. Some people talk about this as the culture of the company. I tend to think of it as the vibe, and there's lots of different vibes companies can have. You could have a happy vibe, a fun vibe, an optimistic vibe, a hippy-dippy vibe. Whatever it is, you need to know that your vibe is under constant attack, oftentimes from things that you can't control, like the economy or competitors. For that reason, vibe can change. The culture of your company, if you're not careful, can change. Here's a random example. Let's say the president of your country suddenly and unexpectedly decides to impart tariffs on a foreign country, and your company does all of its manufacturing in that foreign country. You know how quickly the vibe and the feelings inside of your company can go from optimistic to pessimistic. For these reasons, I encourage you not to focus on the vibe of your company, because there's too many factors that you can't control that will change it. I feel the same way about culture, by the way. Culture is really a passive term to talk about the current state of how a company feels. But companies are dynamic. They're constantly changing. If you're going to avoid big dumb, you need a proactive weapon that's going to help you make smarter decisions. This weapon is called a value system, and it's going to help ensure that as your company gets bigger, it gets more awesome, it gets smarter, it gets more agile. What do I mean by value system? As usual, I have a very specific definition in mind. A value system is a set of criteria you use to make decisions around how you treat your coworkers, your customers, and your partners when faced with important decisions that have meaningful trade-offs. You see, if you think about it for a second, a business is really just defined by the people that you hire and the decisions that you make. And the real difference between businesses are those big, important decisions. And those decisions aren't easy. They involve trade-offs. You're going to get some stuff, you're going to give up some stuff. If those big decisions were easy, then every business would look the same, and the formula for success would be the same. Great businesses with strong value systems, they recognize that the big decisions aren't about something being right or wrong. They realize it's about trade-offs. You're going to get something, you're going to give up something. And they rely on their value system in those moments to make the right trade-offs and be really consistent about it. You see, unlike culture and vibes, values aren't a passive description of the current state of things. They're an active weapon that helps you make smart decisions consistently and to avoid the big dumb ones. So how do you go about deploying this weapon? Well, it starts with you and your team defining your values. Now, every company hopefully has different values, so your company ends up being unique and not looking like everyone else. But there are some common attributes in defining strong values that can help guide you to something that's going to actually have true impact. So let's dig into it. Number one, your value system will not change over time. Your values are impervious to external factors like competition or the economy. It doesn't matter if the company's growing or shrinking. In good times and bad, you will not waver in your decision criteria around how you treat your employees, your customers, and your partners. This last part is super important because we've all seen where a company treats their employees really well and says it's part of their value system, but then they change the way they treat people when things hit a rough patch. Those decisions start to feel inauthentic. They start to feel like big dumb. And the second important attribute of a value system is that values are divisive and serve as a powerful filtering mechanism for hiring the right people. So what do I mean by divisive? If you're going to build a great company, then your value system has to be unique. It has to be differentiated. If your values appeal to everyone on the planet, then you're not going to be able to use them to filter out and find the extraordinary people that want to run the company the way that you want to run it, that is differentiated from everyone else. You need to define values that apply to only a minority group of people, an extraordinary group of people that want to build a company the same way that you want to build your company. If you do that, your brand will get stronger over time. You'll become more focused. It'll be easy to say no when you're faced with decisions that don't align with your values. I mentioned using your value system as a screening tool for new hires, and this is the most important part. People always say, how do I grow my company and keep it awesome? Hire people that have the same values as you and be unrelenting in your commitment to do that. Let me give you a concrete example. Several years ago, I was part of a very special company with a strong value system, and one of our values was that we would hire great people and we would trust them to do great things. Now, that doesn't sound very divisive. I mean, who doesn't want to work for a company that hires great people and trusts them to do great things? It turns out the majority of people don't want to work in that environment. Now, there's two parts to it. There's the hiring great people and trusting them to do great things. I'll just focus on that second part. Don't you want to work at a place where they trust you to do great things? Turns out the majority of people don't, because if you work in that type of environment, you're going to be asked to make decisions all the time, and the company is going to hold you accountable for those decisions. In our company, there was no world where you got to sit back and let your manager or leadership make decisions. You had to make decisions and you had to live with those and you had to be accountable for those. The vast majority of people would much prefer to work in an environment where someone else tells them what to do, they do that work, and then if there's a mistake, they can look up and say, hey, I did what you told me to do, sorry it didn't work out. I want to highlight here that there's a trade-off. You see, if you want to work at a company that's going to trust you to do great things, you're going to be held accountable. And that isn't right for everyone. You see what I'm doing here? It's a really powerful trick. It's a really powerful weapon. Instead of selling you on how awesome our value system is, which is what most people try and do, in an interview process, you need to take your values and think about how they don't appeal to a lot of people and describe them in that way. Describe them in the negative light. In my example, we were trusting people to do great things. Instead of talking about that, I'm going to talk about being held accountable, making decisions. In the interview process, one of two things are going to happen as you talk about your values in a negative light. Either people are going to start to fidget around and ask for lots of clarification. Now, when you say make decisions, like I'm going to have plenty of ramp up time and, I'll always be able to go and check in with my manager right before I make a decision. But if you have the right person in the seat when you're doing the interview process, no matter how negative you try and make your value system sound, they'll just lean in and say, yeah, that sounds right. That sounds good. Yep, no, that sounds like exactly the kind of environment that I want to work in. Use your value system as a filtering system. Don't sell your value system. Talk about it, understanding that it shouldn't appeal to the majority of people, and then let that serve as a filter so you end up with the right people. So what do big, dumb companies have in common? They lack a strong value system that they can rely on to make critical decisions around how they're going to treat their coworkers and their partners and their customers. And so one of two things happens. Either you get a bunch of different people with different values making very different decisions and it starts to feel inconsistent. It starts to feel dumb. Or the company recognizes that they have misaligned values, and so they limit the number of people that can make decisions. And in some ways, this is even worse because you have a big company in terms of people, but you have a very small company in terms of the amount of brain power you're utilizing. And that's it. That's how you keep your company awesome and feeling special as you grow. It's consistency around your decision making, the trade-offs you're willing to make when it comes to how you're going to treat your coworkers, your customers, and your partners. I hope you enjoyed this topic. I've talked a lot about value systems over the last 15 years. I've given some talks on it. About 10 years ago, I wrote a blog post called Values versus Vibe, which still feels pretty relevant and goes into a little bit more detail. So I'll include a link in the description down below if you want to read that. I often get lots of follow-up questions on this topic, so don't hesitate to hit me up in the comments down below and I'll be sure to engage. If you're enjoying this content, please consider subscribing to the channel. Keep the likes coming. If you want to be notified when the next episode's available, you can just hit that little bell icon. I think it's over here, and you'll get a notice next time one comes out. I'm trying to do these about once a week. We'll see if I can keep up that pace. Until the next time, cheers.